This is AM Agenda. Thanks for your company. The Labor leader Bill Shorten yesterday in Parliament called for a Team Australia approach when it comes to the Indonesia spying row. Tanya Plibersek, the Shadow Foreign Minister, this morning, though, had a bit of a dig at the government, saying that they'd made missteps from day one when it comes to the Indonesia relationship.
The announcement of the turn back the boats and buy back the boats policies before the government was elected were very troubling for the Indonesians. They didn't like the fact that people in Australia were making plans for what would happen on Indonesian soil and in Indonesian waters without talking to the Indonesians. So the relationship was under strain. This has kind of pushed it a little bit further along that strained path.
I'm a bit confused about the opposition's position on this issue. On the one hand, they are saying that they support everything that the government does to try and repair the relationship with Indonesia that's occurred because of these incidents in recent days. On the other hand, they're still trying to play politics with foreign policy.
And with me on the program this morning to discuss this and the other matters of the day, the Shadow Parliamentary Secretary, the Opposition Leader, also spokesperson on trade investment, Jim Chalmers, and Liberal Senator Zed Seselja. Now, Zed, first to you on this. Tanya Plibersek says she is supporting a bipartisan approach, is backing the government to resolve this ASAP, but is giving context as to how this has erupted the way it has. Isn't that fair enough?
Well, look, no, I don't think it is. And I think I agree with Christopher Pyne. There is a bit of a confused approach. I think we were all heartened. I think the government would have been heartened and the Australian people would have been heartened that yesterday we saw words from the opposition that suggested that they did want to work with the government on this, that they didn't want to play petty politics on this in the national interest. We see a moving away from that from Tanya Plibersek today.
She says that Mr Abbott needs to own injudicious comments, that needs to be accountable for them.
Well, look, I think that's a real long bow, given the issue at hand. The issue at hand in relation to intelligence matters. I think that Tanya Plibersek is conflating a whole range of issues unreasonably, and I think it's unfortunate that what we saw yesterday, what seemed to be a genuine bipartisanship in dealing with what is a difficult but very, very important issue for Australia and for Indonesia, seems to have shifted a little bit this morning with the Deputy Leader of the Opposition making those comments.
Well, Jim Chalmers, where is Labor on this? Because initially as well, Labor had urged Tony Abbott to go the Obama line. It seemed there was a gap there as well. What is there some confusion here?
No, the whole country and the whole Labor Party wants to see this relationship repaired. I think what Tanya was doing entirely reasonably is pointing out the fact that the relationship is not in good nick right now. And that is the context for all of the discussions that are happening now. I think whether it's Bill Shorten, Tanya Plibersek, every member of the Labor Party is prepared to work with the government because Australia has a real stake in getting this important relationship right.
But Bill Shorten yesterday said he supports Team Australia.
Indeed.
And then this morning, Tanya Plibersek had a dig at the government. Does that work?
I watched Tanya Plibersek's interview and then her subsequent interview as well, and she was saying the same thing, that everyone needs to work together to repair this important relationship. I think it's entirely reasonable that we lay out on the table the context for the problems that the relationship is experiencing right now, and that's all that Tanya was doing.
Do you think that Yudhoyono's reaction has been made more fierce, I suppose, because of the asylum seeker issue?
I wouldn't want to get into that, so I don't know the Indonesian president's innermost thoughts. What I do know, and I think Zed and I can agree, and certainly the whole Parliament can agree, that this is a crucial relationship for Australia. It needs to be repaired, and we'll do what's necessary to help that.
How important is it that it's done this year before the election season next year? There's parliamentary and presidential elections in Indonesia.
Yeah, I mean, even political considerations or not, it's crucial that this problem not be allowed to fester. The relationship's so important across trade, all the economic stuff, all of the national security, all of those issues. It's so important that we can't let a bad situation like this fester. That's why we're prepared to be constructive and help the government where we can.
Zed Seselja, do you think that Tony Abbott is aware, will have foremost in his mind this timeline, the fact that we are heading into a parliamentary election year and presidential election year in Indonesia, where you would expect nationalism, nationalistic sentiment to be seized upon by politicians. It's not really the best climate to try and resolve these sorts of things.
Well, Kieran, I don't think the Prime Minister would have in his mind artificial deadlines. I think what the Prime Minister would have in his mind is the Australian national interest and the importance to the Australian national interest of having a positive relationship with Indonesia. So I don't think it'd be helpful for Tony Abbott or anyone else in the government to be thinking in those kind of terms. I think what he will be thinking is that he needs to continue to work in the national interest, never sacrificing the national interest in his dealings with any other country, but recognising that Indonesia is a good friend of ours, has for a long time been a good friend of ours. There are some difficulties in the relationship which we need to work on.
Well, he's promising a full, courteous and swift response, but if it's not full enough to placate President Yudhoyono, there does not seem to be any resolution in sight, does it?
Well, look, Kieran, I think we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves. I think he has been very clear, the Prime Minister has been very clear in how he will respond, and what he has said is that Indonesia is a very important relationship to us. He has deep respect for our good friend President Yudhoyono, but also that Tony Abbott will never do anything that undermines the Australian national interest, because that is absolutely his first responsibility.
Can I just pick up on something there, Kieran? I mean, Zed rightly talked about the national interest, courtesy, respect. There is a big problem in that one of Tony Abbott's closest advisors, Mark Textor, made some disgusting and disgraceful comments about an Indonesian cabinet minister, which Tony Abbott really needs to publicly distance himself from, because while we're all headed in the same direction, Zed, me, the Parliament, all want to fix this relationship up, we can't have these sort of disgraceful and disgusting comments made by Mark Textor to be hanging out there when the Indonesians know that Textor is a very close friend and close advisor to the Prime Minister of Australia.
Well, look, I think Greg Hunt put it well this morning. Private citizens will make their comments. What we're dealing with...
He's a close advisor to the Prime Minister, though. It's important we send a message to the Indonesians.
What we're dealing with here is how the Australian government deals with Indonesia, and Tony Abbott, as the head of that government, is leading that effort, and no doubt people like Julie Bishop and other senior people in the government will be part of that effort. I think what other individuals have to say is really not important in how we deal with one of our closest neighbours.
I want to ask you about the debt ceiling to finish. We've got 3 minutes left. Jim Chalmers, you've worked closely with Martin Parkinson in your former capacity as Chief of Staff to the Treasurer. You know him well.
Yeah.
Now, he says it's prudent to lift the debt ceiling to $500 billion. Why doesn't Labor just agree to that now?
It was far from a glowing endorsement, I think. I watched that evidence that Secretary Parkinson gave. He also said a couple of other things which need to be recognised in this conversation. The first one is that the $400 billion, which is on the table right now, would not be breached in the next year. So there's no rush. That's the first point. Second point that he made was that the $500 billion debt limit that the Liberal Party want to pass through the Parliament was the government's idea and not the Treasury's idea. So I think we need to look at Parkinson's evidence in its totality rather than just that one little bit. The reality is the Australian people would be scratching their heads about this. Joe Hockey went round the country saying he was against debt. Now he wants to jack up debt to $500 billion, and it's one of the many ways that this is not the government that they said that they would be.
Martin Parkinson did say that, didn't he, Zed, that there's no urgency to this in the sense that the debt ceiling won't be hit over the next year?
Well, I don't think that's quite what he said, and I think it was quite instructive that he alluded to the US situation. I think that is pointed language from a senior bureaucrat to point to the US situation and the difficulties there. And what he was saying in choosing a prudent debt limit, in his words, of $500 billion, is you are avoiding the uncertainty that goes with these issues consistently being revisited and the brinkmanship that we've seen overseas and we certainly don't want to see here. So I'd make a couple of final points on this. This is Labor's debt. This is Labor's legacy to the Australian people. The coalition has a responsibility to try and turn that around, but we need to do it prudently. We need to do it sensibly, and allowing that buffer will help build confidence in financial markets and in the broader economy, and that's why it's the responsible course.
We're out of time, gents. Good to see you both. Zed Seselja, Jim Chalmers, thanks
you. Thanks, guys.
A quick break, and I'll be back with strategic analyst Alan Beam to look at the Indonesia crisis.